ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Callous and Casual was the first murder. The two that followed were calculating and cruel. In May of 2016, Brice Rhodes snuffed out the life of Christopher Jones, Larry Ordway, and Maurice Gordon. The evidence is going to show that these acts occurred basically as two acts. And so if this were a play, these would be the characters that are involved in the first act. We have Maurice Gordon and Larry Ordway. Despite having different last names, these two are brothers that live together. They went to school at Olmsted. They liked playing basketball. They enjoyed rapping. They were always hanging out together. They had a home. They had a family. But from time to time, they would be out of the house for a few days. That wouldn't be anything unusual for them. They were born 2 years apart and a day, so they almost had the same birthday. And unfortunately, they both died on the same day, which we'll get to a little bit later. So these two brothers that were always hanging out together, 16 years old and 14-year-old, were friends with several people, one of which was Jacory Taylor. Now, Jacory, you're going to hear testimony from him. He's going to testify. He had a rough go of it. He had lost his job at White Castles. He was in and out of people's houses. He would stay in the stairwell at his girlfriend's house. He was just kind of on the boundary of things. And he was friends with both Larry and Maurice. And Jacory goes by Corey also sometimes. And Maurice Gordon also goes by Maurice. And they were mutual friends with Brice Rhodes, the defendant here, who went by Rambo. Brice Rhodes, was 25 years old at the time in 2016 when he's hanging out with 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds. Jacory was 17 years old. And there's one more person in this friend group. Antoine Carter, right here. And he goes by Buddha. And he was just a friend of theirs that would hang out. So, as they were hanging out, an idea came about. This is a picture of Larry and Maurice, Mr. Rhodes, the defendant. It's a picture of Antoine and a picture of Jacory. Now I'm going to leave this up here just as a reference for you all, so when the names start going, you can look back. So, one night with Brice Rhodes, we came upon an idea. And the idea was basically there was a hit out on somebody, and they were going to kill that person and collect on the hit. And Brice Rhodes was aware of this hit and knew who would pay on it and knew who the target was. So, on May the 4th, 2016, now keep in mind, all the events from this case happened in May of 2016. So, when you see witnesses on the witness stand, they don't look at all the same as they looked back then. And also, people's memories are a little bit different because this happened a while ago. So, the idea was this. They all hopped in a car on May the 4th, and Maurice was driving the car. It was a blue Mazda that was owned by the defendant, Mr. Rhodes. The front passenger seat was Larry. Brice Rhodes was in the back behind the driver's seat. And Corey Taylor was on the right behind the passenger seat. Trailing in a different vehicle was Antoine Carter. He's in a truck that's following behind his car. So it's nighttime, and they're driving around looking for this guy, looking to collect the price on his head. As they approach, here's a picture of Antoine, who was the follow driver. He was 17 at the time. As they approach 41st Street, there's video of the car driving by, then video of the truck. What happened was a man was walking out in the streets, and he had long braids. And so he looked like the guy that Brice Rhodes believed the hit was on. So Brice Rhodes rolled down his window. The guy was walking out of the street. Cars parked in the road. He's walking out into this, away from the street, in between the cars. And Brice Rhodes yells out the window to him, "Hey, get out the road, bitch," and then shoots him one time in the side. And the bullet wound is going to go through his arm and into his side. Police are going to be alerted that there was a shooting and respond to the scene. The man on the pavement there is Christopher Jones. He had nothing to do with any hit or street business. He was just in the wrong place in the wrong time and ended up being shot. He was still alive, but non-responsive there at the scene. EMS took him to the hospital where he passed away. This is the intersection of the nearest street the police reported to. There's another picture of Mr. Jones. And this is a picture from the body cam of approximately where his body was in the road as the car drove by. You can see this is the clothes he was wearing, some of the items that were on his person. You can see a single bullet wound in his arm, and then the entrance of the bullet wound that turned out to be fatal into his chest. So that's the end of what, if this were a play, if this wasn't so serious, we'd call the first act. Now, a couple different ways it happened. But essentially, Brice Rhodes became aware by overhearing a phone conversation with Jacory talking to Maurice that they were talking about the murder that had happened, that their family knew about it. And as soon as Mr. Rhodes knew that the boys were talking, even just to their family, he knew that they had to do something about these boys to keep them from talking, to cover up his first murder. So this is a black Dodge Charger that Mr. Rhodes had access to and often drove. And you're going to hear testimony that on the 22nd of May, just a couple of weeks later, this black Charger picked the boys, Larry and Maurice, up at their house. And that was the last time that anybody from that apartment was going to see them alive again. So Maurice and Larry are obviously going to be the victims in this second act. And it's going to be carried out by a defendant named Tyrion Coleman, by Antoine Carter, who was involved earlier, and by Corey Taylor, and by Mr. Rhodes himself. So I'm going to leave that up there for your reference. So this is Brice Rhodes' apartment that he lived at with his mom. He had the boys over there. It was four of them, well, the six of them, four individuals listed there, Maurice, Larry, and another individual. And as the night got on, boys started wrestling around, and there was a little bit of a skirmish that broke out with Maurice. And so Brice Rhodes said it was time to discipline Maurice. Maurice had pulled out a knife on somebody, and so Brice hit him upside the head pretty hard, took the knife. He then said, "It's time for you to be disciplined." So he went up to Maurice, he put a toboggan on his head, and pulled it down over his eyes so he couldn't see. And he tied his arms behind his back so that he couldn't move. And he made him beg for forgiveness and plead for his life, which he did. He was begging everyone in that room to spare him and apologizing and saying he was sorry. So Larry, his brother, was taken and held in a different room. And from Larry's room, he could hear his brother pleading for his life. He could hear what happened to his brother. And what happened to his brother is that he was punched a few times by Mr. Taylor. And then Brice Rhodes took a knife and began stabbing him over and over and over again. In the chest, in the midsection, and in the genitals. He was screaming and crying out for help, and his brother was helpless a room away to do anything about it. When they were finally done, they rolled Maurice over, and then they brought Larry into the room. And then they repeated the process. They took the toboggan off, they put it on Larry's head, they put something over Larry, and they started stabbing him till he died there in that apartment. Brice's mom and sister, who shared that apartment with him, were out of town that weekend. So he had the place to himself. He had the people involved help him take the body of the boys and put them in some totes. which he then carried down and put in the back of his Mazda. Some in the back seat, and one of them in the back seat, and one of them in the trunk. And then he drove off. Now he left Antoine and Jacory at the house to clean up because there was blood all over the carpet. He gave them cleaning supplies, and he gave them towel. And just for good measure, because his mom was out of town, he had them also do his dishes while they were scrubbing up the blood. He and other individuals went and dropped the body of the boys off, dropped their bodies off. He also set fire to the items that were associated with the stabbing and left it in a dumpster. Dropped the bodies off around 4028 River Park Drive, which you can see from the area is near the park, near Wyandotte Park, where they play ball. So on the 22nd day of May, this is what somebody in the neighborhood discovered. 2 boys, mutilated, stabbed, set on fire, and left like trash. So the boys' parents are starting to wonder where they're at when they don't come home after the first day. And so Mom gives them a call. Well, the person that answers the phone isn't Maurice. It's Antoine Carter. And he tells her, kids are fine. They're doing something else. I just borrowed the phone. So police discover the 2 bodies. And eventually they have sketch artists come out. They can't get fingerprints because the bodies are too badly burned. They have sketch artists come out and draw a picture of how the boys looked, and they're looking for, checking news stories for missing boys. Eventually, they find that there's 2 boys that are missing from Olmsted School, and they have the boy's mother come out, and she identifies that, yes, that's them. From there, police realize a couple things. They know who the boys left with that night. They know that it was Mr. Rhodes. They also know that they left with Antoine Carter and Jacory Taylor. So police track the phone, and eventually it leads them to Antoine Carter. And Antoine Carter eventually ends up talking to police and explaining what happened after some little bit of give and take. He finally got to the story of what happened. About this same time, police pick up Brice Rhodes, and he gives a short statement, which you will hear. Police go out to Brice Rhodes' house once they've heard what happened, and they start pulling up the carpet from his house. And when they do a DNA analysis on that carpet, of course, they find the blood of the 2 brothers is there on the carpet. Police also learn that after this event, after that night, when Brice Rhodes comes back from dropping the bodies off, he picks up the 2 boys that were left to clean up the house. Jacory had with him the boots that he wore in the house. And he left those boots at a girlfriend's house. And so police got a search warrant. They go to that girlfriend's house, and those boots, the DNA on those boots, comes back to the boys as well, corroborating what was said earlier. He also gives a statement to police, and it pretty much matches the statement of Antoine Carter that I've just relayed to you. So here's a picture of the apartment, how cleanly the flooring was stripped from Brice Rhodes' place. Another thing that police did once the investigation got underway was they went and looked at Brice Rhodes' blue Mazda that had transported the two victims in the tote sacks. And you'll notice this is a picture of the back seat of the Mazda. All the cloth seating has been ripped out of it. And this is a picture of Jacory at the police station giving his statement. You can see, I want you to remember how young he truly is. At this point in time, he is 5'5", weighs 122 pounds. Brice Rhodes is a 25-year-old grown man. This picture of the boots that were recovered from the girlfriend's house. You're going to hear from a lot of different people that are going to come through here. The police that were involved with both of these investigations that had to piece together that the two investigations were connected and take over. So there's going to be two different lead officers. You're going to hear from experts in, you're going to hear from the medical examiner. You're going to hear from CSU professionals. You're going to hear everything that the police did to make sure that the three victims in this case get justice. And I hope at the conclusion of the Commonwealth's case, you will give them that justice. Thank you.